This is the 4th generation of the BMW 1 Series. We had the E Series, we had the F Series, then we had the recent F Series, which is the F40, and now we have this, the F20 M135. And I'm going to ask the question, have BMW taken things a step too far? Let's find out. So the M135i is a good option for somebody that wants a small hatchback with enough poke for a nice little Sunday drive. And because it's xDrive, you can use it all year round. And in a time far, far, far away, it previously used to be only rear-wheel drive. And if we are going to go there, the previous generations, which were fan favourites, M135i and M140i's, were 6-cylinder rear-wheel drives. This is now a 4-cylinder xDrive. So another question would be, was the previous B58 and N55 1 Series a mistake? And are we now getting what we should have had? Now, in this individual market, the hatchback all-wheel drive, you have this at 43k, a Golf R at 43k, or an Audi S3 at 47k. Are these hatchbacks getting too expensive? So now the question I'm asking is, where has that money been spent? Maybe on this new curved display, which I've got to say, looks okay, doesn't look too big, and on some other hatchbacks, this screen here just doesn't really work. You've got a lot of empty space now. Maybe the glove box could have been a bit bigger, but overall, driver visuals, it works. It definitely works. Now down here, a change that I'm really not used to is we no longer have a knob here. Everything is kind of touchscreen. All you can do down here is change your music tracks, roll the volume up and down, and you also have your drive selection here with the My modes, which is not everyone's cup of tea, but I'm going to be brutally honest, I need a knob.
What?
So something you'd notice is that you no longer have the light switch over there. It's now incorporated into the indicator stalk, which is okay. Again, why? Are you saving money? Because if you are, 43k is a lot of money. And online, a few people have said this feels quite cheap. And if I'm being brutally honest, it feels normal. It feels totally normal. Again, maybe just because I'm a cheapskate. But either way, you're a BMW driver. You're not even going to touch this. Now, on the exterior, I've got to come out there and say I'm not the biggest fan. I can't find an angle that makes this front end look good. And again, it's not the grille, because this section is totally fine. And again, you've got lines on the bonnet to make the car look a bit more aggressive. Very similar to how the G8X cars are, the M3 and the M4s. But it's just these lights. These lights don't look very BMW. And the fact that they've now gone for this new LCI style, it does really look like the armchair warriors say, Focus, Fiesta, Kia vibes. I'm sorry, I have to agree. And whilst we're around the front, these might not be everyone's cup of tea, but they do make the car look a tad bit more aggressive. And again, a lot of these manufacturers are now trying to add a lot of things as standard to stop people from modifying their cars. So yeah, well done BMW, you're getting smart. Now round the back is where I kind of subscribe to this car. You've got this nice aggressive spoiler just up here, which does really flow with the car's lines. But down here you can see we've got quad tailpipes, which for me, if you're driving anything M, bearing in mind there are some manufacturers that just like to slap badges on their cars, BMW, this actually makes sense. It's an M model, you want it to stand out, so why not give somebody something to look at when you are absolutely gapping them in the wet anyway? And if you are keen-eyed, you'd notice there's no longer an eye over here on the badge. It's now known as the M135 because the eye is only going to be used for electric models. And while we are around the back here, look at these arrow lights. I've got to say, like I said, the rear, I like. Me likey the rear. Now this car feels pretty nippy. However, we are actually down 6 horsepower from the last generation and 50 newton meters as well. So with those sort of specs, 300 horsepower, 400 newton meters, is that enough to still compete with the likes of the Audi S3 and the Golf R? I'm not too sure. Driving them back to back, maybe you'd notice a difference, but on roads like this, plenty quick enough, especially with this boost pedal, which when you hold it, it counts to 10, it counts down from 10, and you have instant boost, which is quite fun. Now, comparing this to the previous gen, BMW have claimed to, every time I say BMW, this thing is going to just keep popping up. So since the last model, the previous gen, it's claimed that there has been some changes to the chassis in terms of rigidity and how this thing corners. I can imagine they're telling the truth. Again, it is down to xDrive, a lot of it, but the chassis definitely feels stiffer than before. So in this case, I'd have this stiffness all day. Now, going through the My modes, which is the new name for the driving modes, you actually have 3 settings. You've got personal, sport and efficient. You've also got expressive and relaxed, but I think they change more the colors and the theme of the car. But in personal, the dampers and the steering lightens up. The gearbox isn't as aggressive as expected. This is now the DCT, not the ZF8. And it rides these bumps really, really well. And then the press of that button again, back into sport, it isn't as fast as your old school DCT, but I think the kick in the back with just 400 Newton meters at times makes you feel like you're actually going quicker than you are. And looking down here, I'm not going that quick. Now, it's sad that off late, most of the cars that are being made are all xDrive, or if you're lucky, you've got switchable drivetrains from rear-wheel drive to all-wheel drive. Now, with that, on some of the models, people do say that you feel it more in the rear when you do put your foot down at low speeds. How does this feel? Being brutally honest, I have yet to slow down, other than just now. Slow down a little bit, because that car is slowing down in front, I promise. And if I plant my foot, it's a tricky one, because the rear does squat and the car does push. But say if we are coming up to just this bend in front and we decide to put our foot down halfway through the turn, I cannot feel whether it's front or rear. Maybe in a heavier car I'd notice, but for me, xDrive's all about grip. Whether it's front or whether it's rear, it just works. And whether it's bias on the rear, probably would be great on track because you'd want more steer on the front and less understeer. But like I said, it feels very, very balanced. Now, in terms of driving this car and ease of drive, it's very, very straightforward to drive. You jump in, you've got this weird gear selector here. At least it's not on a stalk. Sorry, Volkswagen. It works. It works. Would I prefer a normal shifter? 100% yes. Would I get used to it? Probably. So the ZF8 is now gone and we are now greeted with the DCT. What do I think of it? Being brutally honest, it is slightly delayed, but this is a 1 Series. It's not an M2, it's not an M3, it's not an M4, so I wouldn't have expected it to be that quick. However, is that speed or delay in shifting gonna be a problem for you day to day? Probably not, but it again is a 1 Series, and this is what we need to try and remember. When you see these cars, you end up comparing them naturally to their previous counterparts. But if it's another generation, should we really be doing that? Because again, this isn't anything to replace a 135i or a 140i. This is something to go against an S3, something to go against an M135i F20. So that being said, it's a day-to-day car that can be taken out on the B road. And can it do that? Yes. So having previously owned an M140i, I can honestly say I would take some things from this car. Question is, can you guess it? Can you guess it? Yeah, there it is, guys. Have a look at these seats. For a 1 Series, you've got a lovely bucket style seat, and the previous gen, my car, the F20, yeah, these seats poo all over it. And you've also got the lovely BMW tricolours here. You've got this little gap here, so in case you've had an argument with your husband or your wife, you can sit in the back and give them a little prod by accident, you know what I'm saying? But now even look in the back. I've set up this seat in a position that would suit me very well, and look at the amount of space you get. That's enough leg space. A tiny bit more headspace would be great. And again, you can see it does slant down quite a bit over here, so you could bump your head when getting in. But who's really going to be sitting in the back of a hatchback? Not a 6'4" person, they'll be at the front. In terms of boot space, look at that, an electric boot on a 1 Series. Loads of space in the boot, more than enough for what you need for your day-to-day tasks. So which one would you guys pick? Golf R, S3 or BMW M135i? Let me know in the comments, and while you're there, slide to the left, smash the thumbs up button if you've enjoyed the video, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and I'll see all of your beautiful faces in the next one. Take care and God bless.